romance and sex is an attachment that we have major problems with in our current society. Meaning that a person that is single for a long period of time, like I have been, for example, in our society is made to feel like there's something wrong with them. Like if you're not getting laid, or if you're not in a romantic relationship, then there's something wrong with your life. You're incomplete.
That's
you're doing something wrong.
That's
Nobody
a biological thing that me and my other friend were just talking about 2 days ago. Biologically, how women respond to men. They actually smell on a man. They smell whether other women have been in intimate contact with him. and so if a woman does not smell other women on you, then she'll get the feeling that there's nothing to be had there, and she'll move on. So that's like a biological thing that dates back into the olden times.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, there's a lot of different levels of romantic and sexual connection too. And this relates back to your question, which I actually never answered. We got off on another tangent yet again. This relates back to your question about different levels of feeling. So this is actually a really big question. We assume that when we're having a feeling, let's say a feeling of love, whether it's romantic love or universal love, or there's so many different flavors of love, or if we're feeling anger or hatred or rage or sorrow or grief, we automatically kind of naively assume that the other people around us are capable of having the same emotional capacity as us. In other words, we're assuming that everybody is kind of on the same emotional level, that their emotional experience is going to be somewhat similar to our own emotional experience. That the way that we're feeling and perceiving romantic love, let's say you fall madly in love with someone, and it's an unrequited love, and they don't love you back in the same way. And you're asking, why don't they love me? What's wrong with me? The connection is so powerful, but yet it's not the same for the other person. And so the reason why we don't understand other people's feelings very well is because we are naively assuming that they are having a similar emotional experience and interpretation of that emotional experience as our own, when in fact everybody has their own unique kind of tapestry, kind of like a soul tapestry, which is a filter for consciousness, that their feelings are being projected through from their soul into their human body. And so if a person, for example, has suffered from a lot of abuse during a past life, let's say that their beloved was killed brutally in front of them, and they were forced into sexual slavery, and they were tortured brutally, and that person had experienced several lifetimes like this. Well, typically, we shut ourselves off from different kinds of emotion as a protection mechanism. And so a person who has seen their beloved killed brutally in front of them would typically say to themselves, I'm never going to fall in love again, this is it, and then they would block themselves off from any further romantic experience, because once they reach out to, let's say, another person that they may feel romantically attracted to and fall in love with, that further use of that feeling of, quote, romance is going to bring back the pain of their prior beloved being killed. And so abuse causes us to shut ourselves off from so many different channels of feeling, from so many different avenues of emotion. And it's basically a protection mechanism. And so when you're interacting with another person, and whether you fall in love with them and they don't love you back the same way, or whether you are feeling really, really angry about a particular situation, and the other person is like, what's the big deal? I don't understand, you know. Whenever you're interacting with another person like that, it's very, very difficult to realize in the moment that their emotions have their own filter based on all of their prior experiences on Earth, especially the experiences that have happened during the last cycle, the great cycle of 24,000 years. I think I said 26,000 years earlier, but actually it's 24,000 years because we're in a binary star system with Sirius, and that's a whole nother topic. But when you're dealing with another person, it really, really takes a lot of meditation and a lot of inner examination and processing of one's own emotions, especially the painful emotions, the pains and abuses that you've experienced in the past, the tragedies that you've experienced in the past, in past lives mostly, sometimes in this life, to process all of those abuses, all of those deep pains and tragedies, so that you can kind of clear your own filter. Because until you clear your own filter of consciousness, you're not going to be able to understand anybody else. You have to know yourself before you can know anybody else. And so in our human world here, we are in almost constant conflict with the people around us in various ways. And we're also, connecting to people in loving, peaceful ways as well. And so life is kind of a mix of that. But if you just think about the experience of driving, and someone cuts you off, or someone's driving fast or slow, or driving and what we experience in traffic, and seeing the way that different people drive, this is a perfect example of how different people perceive reality differently. And we do have differences, we do have physical differences that create different kind of being in the body experiences, different life experiences. Especially if a person is really sick or really fit, there's a huge range of experience there physically. Then we have mental differences, all kinds of different opinions. And we tend to talk about our differences of opinions in the mental realms endlessly. But the area that is the area of biggest difference that we almost never talk about really, or at least the area that we don't analyze in the same way as we analyze mental differences of opinion, is the area of emotional differences and how different people perceive different emotions, or how different people experience different emotional realities, because their filter is sometimes vastly different than the person that they're interacting with, or the person that they're in a relationship with, or the person that is their roommate, or something along those lines. When I've had the opportunity a few times in my life to stay completely aloof from my own feelings of being offended or irritated or angry when, let's say, a particular person that I'm interacting with is just pissing me off, and I'm just having a really low opinion of them in that moment, when I can pretend everything is fine and I can totally conceal my own feelings which I normally don't do and I wouldn't recommend, but occasionally I'll be dealing with a person who I will sense there's just no possibility of peace with in that moment because our perceptions of the situation are vastly different. And so I decide instead of creating stress with that person, I'm just going to not react to the situation or to them. But what has astounded me on a few occasions is when I've concealed my own feelings and I've continued to talk to that person in a friendly manner and to kind of question them a little bit and dig into how they actually feel, how they're actually perceiving a particular situation. Very often, their perception of a situation will be so vastly different on an emotional level than my own that it's just astounding. It's almost like we're different species, that we're not even human. That somebody's an alien and somebody's a human. That's how different people's emotional realities can be. And this is why people that are a similar soul age tend to kind of group together because their perception of emotion tends to be similar. And so when you're a very old soul like myself, and I'm not trying to say this in a braggadocious way, but I've been here for a while, and I'm old in this realm, and I'm young in other realms. So it's a whole variety of experience on our soul journey in different places. But for a very old soul like me, it's been extremely hard for me to find people that I can actually emotionally relate to. I've only found maybe like 2 people, maybe 3 people in my entire life, and that's it. And so it's been a lonely journey, to be honest. And I've had so many karmic issues of my own to work on, and very painful, deep karmic issues almost always have to be worked on while you're alone, because another person's presence and energy will interfere with your inner work, because they are bringing another perspective into your space. And to clear your own filter, you have to be alone just with your presence and your own energy. And this doesn't mean that you can't go out and interact with people, but this is one of the main reasons why some people in this world right now have been single for a long, long time, and the universe is not bringing anybody into their life that's a good match for them. And every time they go out and they try to date and they try to find somebody, they're just manifesting a series of bigger and bigger disasters. And I went through that pattern, and I finally decided, okay, screw it. I'm not doing this crap anymore. I was on a dating site, various dating sites for 2 or 3 years, and that was my experience. It was just a series of bigger and bigger disasters. And so I finally realized, okay, this is not the way to go. I need to surrender to my soul and do my inner work. And I realized that everybody that I was meeting was a reflection of where I was at in my own karmic path, in clearing out my own filter. And then I became at peace with being alone until somebody comes into my life that is truly worth being with, that is a true romantic soulmate that is in alignment with me and where I'm at. And so when we have a very deep karmic pain that we're working on that is intensely clouding our own filter, and we realize that we have to work on ourselves first. Otherwise, everything else is just useless, basically. Until you work on yourself, you're just going to keep manifesting reflections of your own crap externally until you resolve it within. You have to clear your own filter within and clean up your own stuff before you're going to be able to manifest what you want in your life. And so that's basically what I've been working on for years and years. And finally, I'm to the point now where I'm starting to manifest what I actually want in my life. And everything is, going really smoothly, but slowly, because Spirit just gives you what you're ready for if you surrender to Spirit. If you don't surrender to Spirit, then you'll end up running around in circles and kind of burning through your karma that way. And that's the slow mode of learning. That's the mode of learning that can take you lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes just to figure out one issue, And so when you discover meditation, then you shift your evolution into turbo, because suddenly you're not out there begging your head against the wall anymore. You're actually examining your own stuff, which is existing in what I would call your subconscious, which we haven't really talked about, but the subconscious is basically the rest of your aura that is not lit up by the assemblage point. That's the subconscious. And so if you say that the assemblage point in most people is the size of a tennis ball, then you calculate the volume of a tennis ball and you calculate the volume of the average aura. Let's say everybody's aura is the same size, and let's say it's 8 feet tall, 8 or 9 feet tall, and extends past the physical body about 3 feet in each direction. And let's say that everybody's aura is about the same size, no matter what their physical body size is. And you calculate the volume of the aura, and then you ask the question, how many tennis balls does it take to fill up the whole aura? How many assemblage points does it take to fill up the entire aura? Well, the answer is over 1,000. Over 1,000 assemblage points. Maybe more than that. I calculated that one time and then forgot the answer, but it was somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, I think. It was a lot. And so let's say the answer is 1,000. Well, that means that your conscious mind, everything that you're conscious of in your entire life, all thoughts, emotions, feelings, opinions, judgments, desires, hopes, dreams, fears, worries, concerns, everything that you could call part of yourself, that is only 1/1,000th at the most of the totality of your human consciousness. We're just talking about your human consciousness. We haven't even gotten into the other levels of consciousness yet, the other dimensions and all of that. That's a whole nother tangent. So it's like in the movie Lucy, when they're talking about the percentage of our brain that we use. And then when Lucy gets to 100%, she becomes like an immortal, invisible being that is everywhere at once. Well, I'd go beyond that even. We're only aware of 1/1,000th of our consciousness at the most. And as we get closer to the golden age, our assemblage point gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the people that are meditating and are walking the path of mastery and are examining their dark side and are cleaning their filters actively, their assemblage point eventually grows to fill their entire aura. And they blaze with light. And this is actually the end goal of evolution in the third dimension, whether it be on this planet or another. The people that reach that state are like blazing candles, or they're like stars on the earth, basically. They're human stars. They've turned themselves into a star. And you can actually see their physical body glow with light. And so this is why many of the paintings of Christ and Krishna and other enlightened beings in the past have that aura of light around the physical body, because when those beings appear for brief periods of time during our history, people that are sensitive enough can actually see a white light coming from their physical body. It's really an incredible sight. And at that point, a person becomes immortal if they choose to be, or they can choose to leave when their task is done, as most do. But there are many immortals meditating in the mountains in the Himalayas and in a few other areas. My feeling is there's probably around 200 or 300 on the whole planet out of billions of people. And so that's the percentage that have made it to that state. And so this goes back to the importance of working on your dark side or your pain body. Because unless you clean your filter, you really can't change anything in your life much, and you can't really manifest what you want. You're just going to continue to run around in circles, even though you may advance yourself as a quote light worker or a psychic or a person with a high level of spiritual awareness and intuition. Unless you clean your filter and work on your pain body, you're not really going to grow in power. You're going to just kind of evolve laterally, but you're not really going to be moving forward very fast. And so evolving forward is very, very hard work. It takes a lot of discipline, and it's very uncomfortable and very painful and sad sometimes. And, that's just the reality of evolution on the earth. We have to evolve past and transcend every horror that has ever happened on the earth. All the way from, the satanic stuff to, getting our heart broken, to being betrayed and lied to seeing our loved ones die, to being killed in thousands of ways ourselves. Sometimes we're ready, sometimes we're not ready, sometimes we don't understand, and it's a huge unfairness. And, why is the body dying now? I was just about to marry my beloved, or I was just about to see my baby being born, and I was killed over in Iraq, by a surprise, roadside bomb that blew up the whole Humvee. And, all this crap happens to us on this planet. It's just unbelievable, And so think about what kind of emotional work it would take for a person to make it past all of that. It's a huge, huge amount of emotional work. And so the journey on earth is a journey of cleansing and evolving emotion more than anything else. It's not really about developing mental capacity and science and reason and logic. We've already done that in higher dimensions. We exist in higher dimensions at the same time we exist in this dimension. And that gets into how the universe was created, and that's a whole other tangent I won't go off on now. But we are already super geniuses in higher dimensions, and we've already fully developed our mental capacities in those dimensions. And that is why the greatest scientific discoveries and advancements usually are from scientists and engineers that are intuitively open. And they'll receive an intuitive insight and then start researching along that avenue, and then they'll discover something wonderful. And they'll just be astounded. Well, that intuition is coming from their higher dimensional self, who already knows everything in the mental realm. So we don't really need to figure out anything in the land of science or in the realm of science and in the land of logic and reason. We've already done that work. Our higher dimensional selves are already enlightened in those areas. You have to become enlightened in higher dimensions first before you can even come to the third dimension. Because the third dimension is fucking hard, and we hurt and we die here and we suffer in horrible, unimaginable ways. So we're already enlightened beings in higher dimensions. So the journey of Earth is the journey of learning how to deal with emotion, because we do not experience emotion in the same way in the higher realms. And people who are very, very connected to the higher realms, of which a lot of my beloved friends are, they're still having issues with earth emotions. And they're expecting that their light work is going to solve everything in their lives, but it doesn't. And they keep having problems, and they haven't reached their potential yet. and they're not really manifesting their entire dream yet. They're working hard, they're doing the best that they can, but light work is only half the answer. The other half of the answer is dark work, working on your pain body. The deep pain body diving article that I have on my blog is a good start there. And so when we're dealing with other people, it is so hard when we're getting offended and angry, or we're falling in love and the other person's not loving us back, or we're in a relationship and we love each other, but one person is not treating the other person in the way that they feel they should be treated, and on and on and on and on and on, the millions of little disagreements and problems that we always have. Most of these disagreements and problems are from different emotional realities, perceiving emotion differently. So the journey of feeling and emotion is the journey of Earth. That's what it's about. And we've been exploring all these different levels of feeling and emotion down thousands of different avenues for a long, long time. A long time. I used to think that I had only been incarnating on the Earth for 6,000 or 7,000 years. But that was because my consciousness, my frequency, was not yet high enough to remember the last golden age. And so I could only remember back until the frequency got too high, and then I couldn't remember. But now that I'm a little further along, I can remember at this point up to 200,000 years ago. And before that, I'm not able to remember yet. But I was a pretty low frequency being during the Dark Age 200,000 years ago. And I did terrible things. And society was really terrible at that time, honestly. The gender gap between men and women was so huge. Or I would say the emotional gap between men and women was so huge that we didn't even speak the same language. You would, if you were a man, you would hunt and bring meat to the gate of the women's village, and then the older women would lay their spears aside and let you in. And then you would, give the cooks the meat, and while they prepared the meat, you could go and run around and rape young girls, basically. As long as you didn't hurt them and leave any permanent bruises, you could run them down and mate with them. And there were about 4 times the number of women as men, because 75% of the male babies were left to die. And the women did this intentionally because they viewed the men as uncontrollable animals, as dangerous people. They didn't consider men to be fully human. And so this is what the Matriarchy descended into during the Dark Age. We had a wonderful matriarchal goddess society before that, but then humanity fell in consciousness, and this is the level that the Matriarchy descended to. And that's why eventually the Patriarchy rose, and we're now repeating the same kind of lesson on the other side of the coin, on the Patriarchy side of the coin, where now men have been dominant and men are the abusers. So we keep repeating the same lessons like this from different sides of the coin over and over again until we get it, until we finally learn the lesson. And new souls keep coming in, and old souls keep departing because they've had enough and they're ready to move on to another planet, another realm, And that's a personal decision for each soul, and there's no right or wrong decision there. I've had experience on many other prior physical planets, and so I've chosen Earth as a planet, at least right now, to try to achieve mastery on. And so I'm walking the path of mastery, and the path of mastery is very, very long. It's much longer than the path of enlightenment that precedes the path of mastery. And so I'm not very far along on that path. I'm kind of like a young, a young yogi or a young disciple on the path of mastery. I haven't made it very far, but I have become fully enlightened in many previous lives, and that's the well from which my intuitive knowledge springs. I don't have to repeat that all over again from the beginning. And so Earth is simply the place that I've chosen to walk my hardest paths, to fight my hardest battles. It's the place where I've chosen to stand and fight. And boy, it's a hard journey sometimes. It really is. And the more you expand your emotional capacity for love and grace and joy, the more deeply you're able to feel pain and suffering, and the more deeply you can fall, the farther you can fall into darkness and horror and pain. And this is, by the way, why twin flames don't meet when they're young souls. One twin has to be older than the other. Otherwise, the twins will become nemesis. They will become enemies because the capacity on Earth for the negative is so huge. And twin flames pull each other into such deep ecstasies of love and wonder and joy that when things go bad, then they get plunged into the depths of hell and hatred and rage and negativity, and they become mortal enemies. And so that's why one twin has to be older and more experienced to not fall into the negative traps, and to be a guide, a mentor for the younger one. That's why twin flames are always a disparate soul age on the earth, at least as far as I know. I can remember a time very early in human history that was actually before we were Homo sapiens, we were another species, where twin flames would incarnate together as young souls, and it always ended in disaster. There was almost never any success doing that. And so on a soul level, we just stopped doing that, and we don't do that anymore, basically. So anyway, that's my whole speech about the earth and the emotional journey here. And so we've been exploring these thousands of levels of feeling, and the whole, if you view it as like a crystal kaleidoscope through which any frequency of energy can be projected through, we've been exploring all different frequencies being projected through the thousands of facets of the crystals in our crystal kaleidoscope through a long, long, long time in this third dimension on different planets and different kinds of bodies, in bird bodies and amphibious bodies and reptilian bodies even, and now we're in mammalian bodies, we're in I just call us little monkey bodies, basically, simian bodies. And all of those different kinds of bodies have different emotional capacities, different emotional characteristics, different mental characteristics. And so the third dimension is mostly the emotional journey. And so if you can meditate and get your emotions in alignment and process your stuff, your darkness, your pain, then you'll be able to manifest what you want in your life. For the most part, nobody gets everything that they want, but your life will improve so massively, it'll just astound you.
So this subject keeps popping up into my mind about enlightening the body, because it seems that the spirit, exists up in a place where there's no time, there's no space, everything is love and light and all this. But the spirit kind of, you might say, descends into the physical realm, gets into a body, into this machine. But yet, there seems to be this want in the machine, the human, the brain. There seems to be this desire to be like the spirit, to be immortal, to be eternal, to learn, to learn what it is to transcend, to ascend. Is that kind of the goal? Like, is that why we live? Is to merge the two and try to form an eternal union?
I remember the first time I experienced Samadhi, which is what the Hindu call the bliss state. And this again is a subjective experience. And no one can tell you if you've experienced the highest state of Samadhi or bliss or not. But for me, when you're in the highest state of Samadhi, time stops. And you instantaneously have two different realizations when you hit that state. The first realization is that there is no higher state. You've reached the max. And that state is infinite, and you can explore that state infinitely. And every time you experience that state, it's like it's brand new, so it never gets old. And the second realization is that you have reached the goal of life. And so the first time I experienced Samadhi, I suddenly realized that this was the reason why my soul chose to incarnate in that first proto-human monkey body and to go through so many experiences and so many lifetimes. The purpose of all of that was to evolve the physical form and the physical and our consciousness encapsulated within the physical form, to evolve all of that to the point where I once again could ascend my consciousness and go back home, which is the state of Samadhi. The state of Samadhi is the state of home.
And is that experienced in the human brain, or is that in the surrender of the brain, so it's just the spirit experiencing it?
What I perceive is that the mind exists outside of the brain. The mind is the assemblage point in the aura, which for most people is about the size of a tennis ball, and it floats right above the crest of your right shoulder blade. That's the typical position of the assemblage point. And so the assemblage point is lit up like a ball of light, and that actually is the conscious mind. And the rest of your aura that is not lit up is the subconscious. And so your mind and the aura is electromagnetically wired into your physical body. And so really it's the aura having the experience of Samadhi and not really the physical body.
So now, what is the physical body doing while you're in Samadhi? What is it experiencing?
Energies in the aura. We have many layers in our aura. We have the spiritual layers, the mental layers, the emotional layers, the etheric template layer, which is kind of reflecting the health of the physical body. All of those layers have certain frequencies and energies kind of swirling around in them. And these energies, through the electromagnetic interface that the aura has with the physical body, cause certain chemical reactions, biochemical reactions in the body. And that translates into our physical experience. And so the physical layer is just our interface, the interface through which we experience the physical reality. And the physical reality is very, very limiting. We can't fly around in the sky, you know. We can run, but that's not very fast. We experience physical pain very, very easily. We get hot, cold, hungry, you know. All of the emotions that we feel translated into the physical body, the physical reality. If you think about all that, it creates a huge challenge to overcome. To go from a proto-human monkey body that is being hunted and killed and eaten to developing, you know, anger that overrides the fear reaction and becoming a warrior, death before dishonor, and developing, you know, tools and learning how to fight in groups. And we took the trees back from the big cats when we learned how to fight in groups, and we claimed the trees once again. And we fought off the packs of hyenas. And then we started to fight, of course, amongst ourselves, and that made war. And then it goes on from there. And to go through all of this huge, vast period of time, all of these lifetimes, and then finally to wake up spiritually and to become aware of things like meditation and unconditional love and compassion, to experience those emotions for the first time. People assume that a person is born with the same emotional capacity as everyone else, and that our ancestors have had the same emotional capacity as us. And that's not true. We had to develop the ability to feel the way that we feel now. And so
we genetically develop that emotional capacity. Is that genetic or is that in the spirit?
Spirit changes DNA over time, changes physical DNA over time. So the answer is yes to both questions.
So it's like the spirit is molding the human through the evolution?
DNA is very, very adaptable and mutable, far more so than we think. And so our physical DNA reflects the spirit, and it becomes whatever it needs to become to serve the needs of our soul. It's as simple as that. We created the physical reality. We created DNA. We designed DNA to fit our needs. So whenever something happens in your life, in your physical reality, and you ask, why did that happen? Why did I break my leg? Why am I in a wheelchair? Why do I have this chronic disease from 3 years old? You know, why did this person die? Why did that person die? Why did I get into this relationship and it was a giant disaster? Why did I have a car wreck? Why can't I take care of my body and I'm overweight? Or why am I always depressed? And why? The answer is because you created it. You created it because you needed to create it. Because that's what your soul chose. That's the hard answer that's underneath life that nobody wants to look at.
Mm-hmm.
You created it. And the only way...
I wouldn't say nobody wants to look at it.
A few crazy people want to look at it, yeah. Like me
That's
and you.
what I'm looking at.
But if you want to understand life and take control of the reins of your own life, then you have to surrender everything in meditation and find those answers in meditation. And then the control and having the reins of life becomes a paradox, because you surrender everything, including all control, to spirit, and then spirit, after a number of years of meditation, hands the reins back to you. And you have to hold the reins of your own life, knowing that you're in complete control of your own life and what you manifest. But at the same time, you have to hold the reins in a state of complete surrender. Otherwise, you enter right back into the ego cycle and the karma. It's a paradox. Everything in life is a paradox. But it's only a logical paradox. It's not an experiential paradox. It's not a paradox when you're living it. You understand how to, as Christ said, fit the camel through the eye of the needle. He was talking about the paradoxes of life. So while you're living the paradox, you figure out how to thread that camel through the eye of the needle. But logically speaking, it seems impossible. It doesn't make sense.
Right. It seems to me that the human brain is very powerful, very complex, very advanced.
Yes.
But it seems to me that the real amazing thing that the brain can do is it can trick itself. It can lie to itself.
Mm-hmm.
And we have somehow created a world, like a society and an economy that is basically a lie. Like it's something that we're choosing to experience just so that we can show ourselves that it's not the real thing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what is real? How do you define real? You know, as Morpheus said to Neo in the Matrix.
Right.
What's real is what you decide is real. It depends on what you create. And so we've created a certain reality that's as real as any other reality. And the only difference between all these different realities that could be created is just the frequency of it, our experience of it. That's it.
My friends. Try again. Hey, my friends, thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, congratulations. You're now enlightened, and you can heal the world. So just go out there and start putting your hands on people, and problem solved. Thank you for listening to Surviving the Apocalypse. There's so much more to come. We are going to head out into the wilderness sooner than I was previously expecting. So we're going to just expedite a few parts of this process and get ourselves out there practicing starting fires, purifying water, building shelter, navigating, all that cool shit that it really comes down to, how to survive. So thank you so much, so much. And I'll see you next time.